Hi everyone, welcome back. We're gonna read some more Matilda today. My dog William has decided to somewhat join us. He loves attention, so you might see him moving around a little bit in the video. Last time we read chapters 5 and 6. Today we are going to read chapters 7 and 8 and figure out more of what Matilda's plans are. So let's get started. Chapter 7 is called Miss Honey. Matilda was a little late in starting school. Most children began primary school at 5 or 6, just before. But Matilda's parents, who weren't very concerned one way or the other about their daughter's education, had forgotten to make the proper arrangements in advance. She was 5 and a half when she entered school for the first time. The village school for young children was a bleak brick building called Cruncham Hall Primary School. It had about 250 kids aged from 5 to just under 12 years old. The head teacher, the boss, the supreme commander of this establishment, was a formidable middle-aged lady whose name was Miss Trunchbull. Naturally, Matilda was put in the bottom class, where there were 18 other small boys and girls about the same age as her. Their teacher was named Miss Honey, and she could not have been more than 23 or 24. She had a lovely, pale, oval Madonna face with blue eyes, and her hair was light brown. Her body was so slim and fragile, one got the feeling that if she fell over, she would smash into 1,000 pieces like a porcelain doll. Miss Jennifer Honey was a mild and quiet person who never raised her voice and was seldom or rarely seen to smile. But there's no doubt she possessed the rare gift of being adored or loved by every small child under her care. She seemed to understand totally the bewilderment and fear that so often overwhelm young children who, for the first time in their lives, are herded into a classroom and told to obey orders. Some curious warmth that was almost tangible shone out of Miss Honey's face when she spoke to a confused and homesick newcomer to the class. Miss Trunchbull, the headmistress, or principal, was something else altogether. She was a gigantic, holy terror, a feast of tyrannical monster who frightened the life out of pupils and teachers alike. There was an aura of menace about her even at a distance, and when she came up close you could almost feel the dangerous heat radiating from her as from a red-hot rod of metal. When she marched, Miss Trunchbull never walked. She always marched like a stormtrooper with long strides and her arms swinging. When she marched along a corridor, you could actually hear her snorting as she went, and if a group of children happened to be in her path, she plowed right on through them like a tank, with small people bouncing off her left and right. Thank goodness, we don't meet many people like her in this world, although they do exist, and all of us are likely to come across at least one of them in a lifetime. If you ever do, you should behave as you would if you met an enraged rhinoceros out in the bush. Climb up to the nearest tree and stay there until it's gone away. This woman, in all her eccentricities, and in her appearance, is almost impossible to describe, but I shall make some of an attempt to do it a little later on. Let us leave her for the moment and go back to Matilda and our first day in Miss Honey's class. After the usual business of going through all the names of the children, Miss Honey handed out a brand-new exercise book to each student. "You have all brought your own pencils, I hope," she said. "Yes, Miss Honey," they chanted. "Good. Now this is the very first day of school for each one of you. It is the beginning of at least 11 long years of schooling that all of you are going to have to go through. And 6 of those years will be spent right here at Cruncham Hall, where, as you know, your headmistress is Miss Trunchbull. Let me, for your own good, tell you something about Miss Trunchbull. She insists upon strict discipline throughout the school, and if you take my advice, you will do your very best to behave yourselves in her presence. Never argue with her. Never answer back. Always do as she says. If you get on the wrong side of Miss Trunchbull, she can liquidize you like a carrot in a kitchen blender. It's nothing to laugh about, Lavender. Take that grin off your face. All of you will be wise to remember that Miss Trunchbull deals very, very severely with anyone who gets out of line in this school. Have you got the message?" "Yes, Miss Honey," chirped 19 eager little voices. "I, myself," Miss Honey went on, "want to help you to learn as much as possible while you're in this class. That is because I know it will make things easier for you later on. For example, by the end of this week, I shall expect every one of you to know that 2 times table by heart, and in a year's time I hope you will know all the multiplication tables up to 12. It will help you enormously if you do. Now then, do any of you happen to have learnt the 2 times table already?" So learning like 2 times 2, 2 times 3, 2 times 4, all of that. So think, they're in kindergarten, roughly, and they're learning multiplication. Some of you just start learning that in like 2nd, 3rd grade. So is this kind of starting early for them? And do you think Matilda knows it? We know she's a very good reader. Matilda put her hand up. She was the only one. Miss Honey looked carefully at the tiny girl with dark hair and round, serious face sitting in the 2nd row. "Wonderful," she said. "Please stand up and recite as much as you can." Matilda stood up and began to say 2 times table. When she got to twice 12 is 24, she didn't stop. She went right on to twice 13 is 26, twice 14 is 28, twice 15 is 30, twice 16 is... "Stop!" Miss Honey said. She'd been listening, slight spellbound, by this smooth recital, and now she said, "How far can you go?" "How far?" Matilda said. "Well, I don't really know, Miss Honey. For quite a long way, I think." Miss Honey took a few moments to let this curious statement sink in. "You mean," she said, "that you could tell me 2 times 28 is?" "Yes, Miss Honey." "Well, what is it?" 56, Miss Honey." "What about something much harder, like 2 times 487? Could you tell me that?" "I think so, yes," Matilda said. "Are you sure?" "Why, yes, Miss Honey, I'm fairly sure." There they are in their classroom. "What is it then? 2 times 487. 974, Matilda said immediately. She spoke quietly and politely and without any sign of showing off. Miss Honey gazed at Matilda with absolute amazement. But when next she spoke, she kept her voice level. "That really is splendid," she said. "But of course multiplying by 2 is a lot easier than some bigger numbers. What about the other multiplication tables? Do you know any of those?" "I think so, Miss Honey. I think I do." "Which ones, Matilda? How far have you got?" "I don't quite know," Matilda said. "I don't know what you mean." "What I mean is, do you, for instance, know the 3 times table?" "Yes, Miss Honey." "And the 4 times?" "Yes, Miss Honey." "Well, how many do you know, Matilda? Do you know all the way up to the 12 times table?" "Yes, Miss Honey." What are 12 sevens?" 84, Matilda said. Miss Honey paused and leaned back in her chair behind the plain table that stood in the middle of the floor in the front of the class. She was considerably shaken by this exchange, but took care not to show it. She had never come across a 5-year-old before, or indeed a 10-year-old who could multiply with such facility. "I hope the rest of you are listening to this," she said to the class. "Matilda's a very lucky girl. She has wonderful parents who have already taught her to multiply lots of numbers. Was it your mother, Matilda, who taught you?" "No, Miss Honey, it wasn't." "You must have a great father, then. He must be a brilliant teacher." "No, Miss Honey," Matilda said quietly. "My father did not teach me." "You mean you taught yourself?" "I don't quite know," Matilda said truthfully. "It's just that I don't find it very difficult to multiply one number by another." Miss Honey took a deep breath and let it out slowly. She looked again at the very small girl with bright eyes standing beside her desk, so sensible and solemn. "You say you don't find it difficult to multiply one number by another," Miss Honey said. "Could you try to explain that a little bit?" There's Matilda at her desk. "Oh, dear," Matilda said, "I'm not really sure." Miss Honey waited. The class was silent, all listening. "For instance," Miss Honey said, "if I asked you to multiply 14 by 19, no, that's too difficult. It's 267, or 66. Matilda said softly. Miss Honey stared at her. Then she picked up a pencil and quickly worked out the sum on a piece of paper. What did you say it was? She said, looking up. 266, Matilda said. Miss Honey put down the pencil, removed her glasses, began to polish the lenses with a piece of tissue. The class remained quiet, watching her and waiting for what was coming next. Matilda was still standing up beside her desk. Now tell me, Matilda, Miss Honey said, still polishing. Try to tell me exactly what goes on inside your head when you do multiplication like you do. You obviously have to work it out in some way, but you seem to be able to arrive at the answer almost instantly. Take the one you've just done, 14 multiplied by 19. I simply put the 14 down in my head and multiplied by 19, Matilda said. I'm afraid I don't know how else to explain it. I've always said to myself that if a little pocket calculator can do it, why shouldn't I? Why not indeed, Miss Honey said. The human brain is an amazing thing. I think it's a lot better than a lump of metal, Matilda said. That's all a calculator is. How right you are, Miss Honey said. Pocket calculators are not allowed in the school anyway. Miss Honey was feeling quite quivery. There was no doubt in her mind that she had met a truly extraordinary mathematical brain, and words like child genius and prodigy went flitting through her head. She knew that these sorts of wonders do pop up in the world from time to time, but only once or twice in 100 years. After all, Mozart was only 5 when he started composing for the piano, and look what happened to him. It's not fair, Lavender said. How come she can do it and we can't? There's Miss Honey cleaning her glasses. Don't worry, Lavender, you'll soon catch up, Miss Honey said, lying through her teeth. At this point, Miss Honey could not resist the temptation of exploring still further the mind of this astonishing child. She knew that she ought to be paying some attention to the rest of the class, but she was altogether too excited to let the matter rest. Well, she said, pretending to address the whole class, let us leave sums for the moment and see if any of you have begun to learn to spell. Hands up, anyone who can spell cat. 3 hands went up. They belonged to Lavender, a small boy named Nigel, and to Matilda. Spell cat, Nigel. Nigel spelled it. Miss Honey now decided to ask a question normally she would not have dreamed of asking class on the first day. I wonder, she said, whether any of the 3 who know to spell cat have learned to read a whole group of words when they are strung together in a sentence. I have, Nigel said. So have I, Lavender said. Miss Honey went to the blackboard and wrote with white chalk the sentence, I have already begun to learn how to read long sentences. She had purposely made it difficult, and she knew that there are precious few 5-year-olds around who would be able to manage it. Can you tell me what that says, Nigel? That's too hard, Nigel said. Lavender? The first word is I, Lavender said. Can any of you read the whole sentence? Miss Honey asked, waiting for a yes that she felt certain was going to come from Matilda. Yes, Matilda said. Go ahead, Miss Honey said. Matilda read the sentence without any hesitation at all. That really is very good indeed, Miss Honey said, making an understatement of her life. How much can you read, Matilda? I think I can read most things, Miss Honey, Matilda said, although I'm afraid I can't always understand the meanings. Miss Honey got to her feet and walked smartly out of the room and was back in 30 seconds carrying a thick book. She opened it at random and placed it at Matilda's desk. This is a book of humorous poetry, she said. See if you can read that one out loud. Smoothly, without pause, and at a nice speed, Matilda began to read. An epicure dining at Crewe found a rather large mouse in his stew. Cried the waiter, don't shout, and wave it about, or the rest will be wanting one too. So several children saw the funny side of the rhyme and laughed. Miss Honey said, do you know what an epicure is, Matilda? Is it someone who is dainty with his eating? Matilda said. That's correct, Miss Honey said. And do you happen to know what that particular type of poetry is called? It's called a limerick, Matilda said. That's a lovely one. It was funny. It's a famous one, Miss Honey said, picking up the book and returning to her table at the front of the class. A witty limerick is very hard to write, she added. They look easy, but they most certainly are not. I know, Matilda said. I've tried quite a few times, but mine are never any good. You have you? Miss Honey said, more startled than ever. Well, Matilda, I would very much like to hear one of these limericks you say you have written. Could you try to remember one for us? Well, Matilda said, hesitating, I've actually been trying to make one up about you, Miss Honey, while we've been sitting here. About me? Cried Miss Honey. Well, we've certainly got to hear that one, haven't we? I don't think I want to say it, Miss Honey. Please tell it, Miss Honey said. I promise I won't mind. I think you will, Miss Honey, because I have to use your first name to make things rhyme, and that's why I don't want to say it. How do you know my first name? Miss Honey asked. I heard another teacher calling you by it just before we came in, Matilda said. She called you Jenny. I insist upon hearing this limerick, Miss Honey said, smiling one of her rare smiles. Stand up and recite it. Reluctantly, Matilda stood up and very slowly, very nervously, she recited her limerick. The thing we all ask about Jenny is surely there cannot be many young girls in this place with so lovely a face. The answer to that is not any. The whole of Miss Honey's pale and pleasant face blushed a brilliant red. Then once again she smiled in such a broader one this time, a smile of pure pleasure. There's Matilda reading the rather large book of poems. Why, thank you, Matilda, she said, still smiling. Although it's not true, it is really a good limerick. Oh dear, I must try to remember that one. From the third row of desks, Lavender said, It's good. I like it. It's true as well, a small boy called Rupert said. Of course it's true, Nigel said. Already the whole class had begun to warm toward Miss Honey, although as yet she had hardly taken any notice of any of them except Matilda. Who taught you to read, Matilda? Miss Honey asked. I just sort of taught myself, Miss Honey. And have you read any books all by yourself? Any children's books, I mean? I've read all the ones that are in the public library in High Street, Miss Honey. And did you like them? I liked some of them very much indeed, Matilda said, but I thought others were fairly dull. Tell me the one you liked. Oh, I liked The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, Matilda said. I think Mr. C.S. Lewis is a very good writer. But he has one failing. There are no funny bits in his books. You are right there, Miss Honey said. There aren't many funny bits in Mr. Tolkien either, Matilda said. Do you think that all children's books ought to have funny bits in them? Miss Honey asked. I do, Matilda said. Children are not so serious as grown-ups, and they love to laugh. Miss Honey was astounded by the wisdom of this tiny girl. She said, And what are you going to do now that you've read all these children's books? I'm reading other books, Matilda said. I'm borrowing them from the library. Mrs. Phelps is very kind to me. She helps me choose them. Miss Honey was leaning far forward over her work table and gazing in wonder at the child. She had completely forgotten now about the rest of the class. What other books? I'm very fond of Charles Dickens, Matilda said. He makes me laugh a lot, especially Mr. Pickwick. At the moment, the bell rang, signaling the end of class. So there is Miss Honey. She must be pretty amazed. Imagine a kindergarten coming in, reading these super long books, being able to multiply huge numbers. I mean, some of those numbers I can't even multiply in my head, and I'm a teacher. So it's pretty impressive. We're going to read Chapter 8. The Trunchbull is chapter this one. So we learned about Miss Honey, and she kind of gave us a little foreshadowing, some hints about what Miss Trunchbull's like. And now we're going to really kind of learn some more about her. This chapter's a little bit shorter, so we'll get started. In the interval, Miss Honey left the classroom and headed straight for the headmistress's study. She felt wildly excited. She had just met a small girl who possessed, or so it seemed to her, quite extraordinary qualities of brilliance. There had not been time yet to find out exactly how brilliant this child was, but Miss Honey had learned enough to realize that something had to be done about it as soon as possible. It would be ridiculous to leave a child like that stuck in the bottom class. Normally Miss Honey was terrified of the headmistress, and kept well away from her, but at this moment she felt ready to take on anybody. She knocked on the door of the dreaded private study. "Enter!" boomed the deep and dangerous voice of Miss Trunchbull. Miss Honey went in. Now, most head teachers are chosen because they possess a number of fine qualities. They understand children, and they have the children's best interests at heart. They are sympathetic. They are fair, and they are deeply interested in education. Miss Trunchbull possessed none of these qualities, and how she ever got her present job was a mystery. She was above all a most formidable female. She had once been a famous athlete, and even now the muscles were still clearly in evidence. You could see them in the bull neck and the big shoulders and thick arms and the powerful legs. Looking at her, you got the feeling that this was someone who could bend iron bars and tear telephone directories in half. Her face, I'm afraid, was neither a thing of beauty nor joy forever. She had a cruel mouth and small, arrogant eyes. And as for her clothes, they were, to say the least, extremely odd. She always had on a brown cotton smock, which was pinched in around the waist, and a wide leather belt. The belt was fastened in front with an enormous silver buckle. The massive thighs, which emerged from underneath the smock, it said tape jacket, were encased in a pair of extraordinary pants, bottle green in color and made in coarse twill, which is like a really thick material. These pants reached just below the knee, and from there on down she sported green stockings with turn-up tops, which displayed her calf muscle to perfection. On her feet she wore flat-heeled brown leather shoes. She looked, in short, more like a rather eccentric and bloodthirsty follower of the staghounds than the headmistress of a nice school for children. When Miss Honey entered the study, Miss Trunchbull was standing beside her huge desk with a look of scowling impatience, like she's like, "Why are you here? You're wasting my time." "Yes, Miss Honey, what is it that you want? You're looking very flushed and flustered this morning. What's the matter with you? Have those little stinkers been flicking spitballs at you?" "No, headmistress, nothing like that." "Well, what is it then? Get on with it. I'm a very busy woman." As she spoke, she reached out and poured herself a glass of water from a jug that was always on her desk. "There's this little girl in my class called Matilda Wormwood," Miss Honey began. "That's the daughter of the man who owns Wormwood Motors in the village," Miss Trunchbull barked. She hardly ever spoke in a normal voice. She either barked or shouted. "An excellent person, Wormwood," she went on. "I was in there only yesterday. He sold me a car. Almost new. Only done 10,000 miles. Previous owner was an old lady who took it out once a year at most. A terrific bargain. Yes, I like Wormwood, a real pillar of our society. He told me the daughter was a bad lot, though. He said to watch her. He said if anything bad ever happened in the school, it was certain to be his daughter who did it. I haven't met the little brat yet, but she'll know about it when I do. Her father said she's a real wart." "Oh, no, headmistress, that can't be right," Miss Honey cried. "Oh, yes, Miss Honey, it darn well is right. In fact, now I come to think of it, I'll bet it was she who put that stink bomb under my desk here the first thing this morning. This place stunk like a sewer. Of course it was her. I shall have her for that. You see, if I don't, what's she look like? Nasty little worm, I'll be bound. I have to get a look at her. I have discovered, Miss Honey, during my long career as a teacher, that a bad girl is far more dangerous creature than a bad boy." There is Miss Trunchbull. That's what she looks like. Does she look all that pleasant or nice to be around? You decide on that. What's more, they weren't much harder to squash. Squashing a bad girl is like trying to squash a blue bottle. You bang down on it and the darn thing isn't there. Nasty little things, little girls. Glad I was never one. "Oh, but you must have been a little girl once, headmistress. Surely you were." "Not for long, anyways," Miss Trunchbull barked, grinning. "I became a woman very quickly." She's completely off her rocker, Miss Honey told herself. She's balmy as bedbugs. Miss Honey stood resolutely before the headmistress. For once, she was not going to be browbeaten. "I must tell you, headmistress," she said, "that you are completely mistaken about Matilda putting a stink bomb under your desk." "I am never mistaken, Miss Honey." "But, headmistress, the child only arrived in school this morning and came straight to the classroom." "Don't argue with me, for heaven's sake, woman. This little brute Matilda, or whatever her name is, stink-bombed my study. There's no doubt about it. Thank you for suggesting it." "But, I didn't suggest it, headmistress. Of course you did. Now, what is it you want, Miss Honey? Why are you wasting my time? I came to talk to you about Matilda, headmistress. I have extraordinary things to report about this child. May I please tell you what happened in my class just now? I suppose she set fire to your skirt or scorched your classroom? Miss Trunchbull snorted. No, no, Miss Honey cried. Matilda's a genius. At the mention of this word, Miss Trunchbull's face turned purple, and her whole body seemed to swell up like a bullfrog's. A genius, she shouted. What piffle is this that you're talking about? You must be out of your mind. I have her father's word for it that this child is a gangster. Her father's wrong, headmistress. Don't be a twerp, Miss Honey. You have met the little beast for only half an hour, and her father has known her all her life. Miss Honey was determined to have her say, and she now began to describe some of the amazing things. Matilda is done with arithmetic. So she's learned a few tables by heart, has she? Miss Trunchbull barked. My dear woman, that doesn't make her a genius, it makes her a parrot. But headmistress, she can read. So can I, Miss Trunchbull snapped. There's Miss Trunchbull. It is my opinion, Miss Honey said, that Matilda should be taken out of my form and placed immediately at the top form, which is 11-year-olds. Ha! Snorted Miss Trunchbull. You want to get rid of her, do you? So you can't handle her? So now you want to upload her on the wretched Miss Plimsoll in the top form where she will cause even more chaos? No, no, cried Miss Honey. That's not my reason at all. Oh, yes, it is, shouted Miss Trunchbull. I can see it right through your little plot, madame. And my answer is no. Matilda stays where she is, and it's up to you to see that she behaves herself. But, headmistress, please, not another word, shouted Miss Trunchbull. And in any case, I have a rule in the school that all children remain in their own age groups regardless of ability. Great Scott, I'm not having a little 5-year-old brigade sitting with the senior girls and boys at the top form. Who ever heard of such a thing? Miss Honey stood there helpless before this great red-necked giant. There was a lot more she would like to have said, but she knew it was useless. She said softly, Very well, then. It's up to you, headmistress. You darn right it's up to me, Miss Trunchbull bellowed. And don't forget, madame, that we are dealing with a little viper who put a stink bomb under my desk. She did not do that, headmistress. Of course she did, Miss Trunchbull boomed. And I'll tell you what, I wish to heavens I was still allowed to use my belt as I did in good old days. I'd have roasted Matilda's bottom for her so she couldn't sit down for a month. Miss Honey turned and walked out of the study feeling depressed, but by no means defeated. I am going to do something about this child, she told herself. I don't know what it will be, but I shall find a way to help her in the end. So Miss Trunchbull was saying that she wished she could spank or kind of hit Matilda with her belt as a form of punishment, which we know is not allowed in schools. So that gave us a little insight on Miss Honey, who is her classroom teacher, and Miss Trunchbull, who is the headmistress or principal of the elementary school that she goes to. So I've read chapters 7 and 8 now for you. I'm going to post the video later with the question sheet for you to answer. Just do your best on those, especially when it comes to the writing. I know usually we'd kind of work together on those and talk about them. Just do your best. Spelling doesn't matter. Get down what you can. And I hope you're working hard at home. Bye.